Excellent. All right. Well, thanks everybody for taking the time this afternoon, and thank you again to Alison and the full Armyworm Action Plan for facilitating this discussion. So as Alison said, I'm the Director of International Capacity Development within the Australian Department of Agriculture, Forestries and Fisheries, and I work with, many of you will know, Sophie and Semi, who are also on the line, and our colleagues in our international team. So I'm going to be talking today about coconut pest prevention, preparedness and response. And I guess just to preface, I'm by no means a technical or scientific expert on coconut pests, but I've spent most of my career in the biosecurity and the prevention and preparedness and response space, and particularly in the Asia Pacific region. So I'll be talking about biosecurity and phytosanitary measures and how that relates to the work that we do as biosecurity agencies in supporting prevention and preparedness and response. Next slide, thanks, Alison. So essentially, in the biosecurity or the quarantine system, obviously there's prevention, is one of the key tasks or key functions that we deliver and we provide as biosecurity or quarantine officers. And really that's around implementing and promoting quarantine and phytosanitary measures, which you should all be very aware of. Obviously there are a number of plant pests and animal diseases that can't be prevented through traditional regulated pathway management and regular quarantine or phytosanitary measures. And fall armyworm is a good example of a transboundary pest that, is very difficult to manage through those, or impossible to manage through those pathways. So we really need to also have a preparedness capacity within our biosecurity and quarantine systems. And this is really around harmonising surveillance and management engagement resources and response. So many of our biosecurity and quarantine agencies are also responsible for the initial response and initial management activities when we do get a new plant pest detection or incursion. And so it's very important that we look at those harmonised contingency response resources and training materials to avoid duplication and to ensure that we're using best practice, and it might be national or regional or international protocols to guide those response activities. Next slide, thanks, Alison. So in terms of coconut pest prevention, obviously there's a lot that we can do around preventing or managing the movement of coconut pests on regulated trade pathways, but also on natural pathways as well, through developing and implementing and promoting globally and regionally harmonised quarantine and phytosanitary measures. So I provided some examples there of obviously the work that I'm sure my colleague Dr. Vasoni will talk about around the SPC guide, but there's a number of resources that are available to actually guide biosecurity agencies through the process of pest risk assessment, pre-border surveillance and the like, around that preparedness, around those prevention measures. Around preparedness, there's obviously a lot that we can do. Sorry, Alison, if we can just go back to the previous slide. Around preparedness, obviously, coconut pests, there's a lot of information, a lot of resources available through our bilateral discussions with our near neighbours and our counterparts at a regional level, but also at an international level that we can access around pest status and coconut pest status for preparedness. So we can do that through developing and implementing contingency and response resources, as well as things like surveillance for early warning and early detection. And there's a number of really good awareness and advocacy materials like the ones there from SPC around Pest Alert, when CRB was first really sort of brought to the attention of Pacific Island countries, and also CABRI libraries that keep those forecasting and those detections and pest status information up to date in terms of distribution of the pests throughout the region and globally. Next slide, thanks. In terms of response, obviously, we're all, or most of you on the line will be very familiar with plant pest and biosecurity response activities. But obviously, there's a lot that's already been done around coconut pest response activities throughout the region on an individual level in individual countries, but also regionally as well. So again, it's important to utilise some of those surveillance and management and response or contingency planning documents when they are freely available and distributed. And there's some examples there of the work that's been done, again, through SBC and through some of the national responses as well. And that central image is a response that I was involved in on CRB in Solomon Islands several years ago. Next slide, thanks, Alison. So in terms of how we implement prevention and preparedness response measures and functions, I guess by way of background, our team or program within DAF has been working very closely with Solomon Islands Biosecurity for almost 10 years now on the Solomon Islands Biosecurity Development Program. And we worked very closely with Biosecurity Solomon Islands back in 2017 and 2018, specifically on coconut related pests and coconut biosecurity to support and to protect their coconut, their domestic and their international trade in coconut products. And so we developed the biosecurity plan in consultation with stakeholders and BSI, and in that we actually identified a number of action areas around prevention, detection and response, particularly at the pre-border, border and post-border. So that was a really practical way of being able to tailor a biosecurity plan on coconut pests for Solomon Islands at that national level. Next slide, thanks. So in terms of surveillance, so part of the work that we did too was really focus on being able to provide a baseline of coconut pest status within the country, obviously to determine what pests are endemic, but also what pests may have moved across either by regulated or natural trade pathways from neighbours in Papua New Guinea or Vanuatu or through the broader region. And so part of that activity involved a very sort of comprehensive baseline survey across a whole range of coconut pests, pathogens, insect pests, as well as weeds as well. Obviously, exotic weeds are quite important in that context. And so that's a good example of where surveillance and those sort of domestic surveillance activities can really complement that prevention and preparedness response. Next slide, thanks. So what we also did, given that coconut market access is really crucial to Solomon Islands economic development and international and export trade, we developed trade and market access dossiers essentially to look at how to support and protect those markets. And again, this is a really good sort of example of how you can use these resources around your preparedness and planning and training, but also in your prioritisation of emerging or near neighbour pest risks. Next slide, thanks. So in terms of regional and global coordination, I know we've got colleagues from, we've got Tanya and Vasani speaking a bit later, but there's also some really good examples of global and regional prevention, preparedness and response resources and, I guess, platforms to be able to support that regional harmonisation and global harmonisation that can be used at the national level. So again, very quickly, Alison and myself were part of a technical working group that developed some guidelines and resources and training products on prevention, preparedness and response of fall armyworm. And these guidelines have now been used as I guess, a model or a template for other significant global and regional pests like Fusarium TR4. And again, these guidelines can be used. You can essentially incorporate coconut pests or pests into that model, and a lot of the principles and a lot of the activities, including things like the limiting surveillance, communication engagement, inspection and diagnostics are all very common across plant pests. Next slide, thanks. So again, for a truly regional or globally coordinated response to a particular pest or pest groups, it really needs a collective effort across the key stakeholders. So in the case of fall armyworm, we have the regional plant protection organisations, the national plant protection organisations, scientific and academic experts on fall armyworm industry representatives. And we also had representation from the IPBC and FAO, which is really critical in terms of coordinating and harmonising those resources. Next slide, thanks. So, as I said, the guideline was a really important tool that was actually used in Solomon Islands. It was finalised or published very soon, about 2 or 3 weeks before the fall armyworm detection in Solomon Islands. So again, it's been sort of tried and tested. Next slide, thanks. And also, similar to the work that we're doing now, and Alison's coordinating around these webinar series, we hosted a number of webinars to really sort of drill down into those very technical or operational areas. Again, they were sort of attended by representatives across the globe, but a very useful and practical tool for that regional and more broader engagement and sort of technical exchange. Next slide, thanks.
30 seconds, Chris.
Thanks, Alison. And finally, it's also very important for any sort of global or regional response of this nature to have somewhere, some central place or platform to be able to host those resources and materials that are developed. So again, in the case of fall armyworm, we do have a website resource page where a lot of those contingency plans and surveillance manuals and trapping information is all hosted. So again, something like that could also be used in the context of coconut pests, either at a regional or global level as well. Next slide, thanks. And that is the end. Thank you very much, and very happy to answer any questions online during the Q&A or offline. Thanks, Alison.